Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a really chilling case.
Oh, yeah.
A very unsolved mystery.
Absolutely.
From 1959, the Walker family murders.
Yeah.
In Osprey, Florida.
Florida man.
You know, and you guys sent us over some amazing sources for this one, a forum discussion.
Right.
From What Lies Beyond.
Oh, I love that forum.
Yeah, it's great. And a bunch of newspaper articles.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, that really captured the shock and confusion of this whole case.
It's one of those cases that really just gripped the nation. And I think even now, decades later, continues to fascinate and frustrate in equal measure.
Totally.
You know? Yeah.
So before we get into all the theories and the suspect,
Okay.
let's kind of paint a picture for our listeners.
Sure.
So we're in rural Florida.
Okay.
December 1959. We've got Cliff and Christine Walker.
Right.
Young couple. Two adorable toddlers. Jimmy, who was 3, and little Debbie, just shy of 2 years old. They lived this, quiet life on a ranch.
Okay.
A seemingly idyllic existence that was totally shattered on a Sunday morning.
Oh, wow.
Just before dawn.
Brutal crime shook the community to its core. I mean, they were very well liked, this family, the Walkers, and by all accounts, no enemies, nothing like that.
Right.
Which makes the savagery of this whole thing even more perplexing.
Yeah, and it brings us to Don McLeod.
Okay.
Who was a coworker and friend of Cliff's. And he was actually supposed to meet Cliff.
Right.
For a hunting trip that morning.
Oh, wow.
He gets to the house, sees the family's car and Jeep in the yard, but something felt off. The house was dark, eerie silence.
So McLeod knew Cliff pretty well and knew something was wrong, so he cuts a hole in the screen door, gets inside. And, that decision driven by gut feeling really reveals this horrifying truth.
What he found inside
was
a scene straight out of a nightmare.
Oh, God.
So let's walk through the crime scene together.
Okay.
Because the layout of the house and the position of the bodies could hold some crucial clues.
Yeah, spatial relationships in a crime scene are really important because they often tell a story. They can reveal a sequence of events, possible interaction between the victims and the perp, and perhaps even something about the killer's state of mind.
Absolutely. So picture this. Cliff and Jimmy were found together in the living room.
Okay.
And the forum post mentioned that Jimmy was still clutching a lollipop.
Oh, no.
From the day before.
Yeah.
Just adds this gut-wrenching layer of innocence to the whole thing.
It almost suggests that he might have witnessed at least part of the attack, right?
Right.
Because he was found near his father as if he crawled toward him for protection.
Oh.
It's very poignant.
And then you have Christine. She was found lying dead on the floor in the doorway.
Okay.
Between the living room and the kitchen.
Now, that suggests that she may have been trying to escape, right?
Yeah.
And remember, one of her bloody high heels was found outside on the porch.
Right.
So that kind of supports this whole idea that there was a struggle.
And then, of course, you have baby Debbie.
Oh, my God.
The most vulnerable victim.
Yeah.
In this horrifying scenario, she was found in the bathtub.
The bathtub. What could possibly be the killer's motive for choosing that location? It's just one of the most disturbing aspects of this case, Yeah. The bathtub. A place that you associate with cleansing and vulnerability becomes the setting for this just unspeakable act of violence.
One of the forum contributors, Kitty, brought up this really chilling detail that the killer apparently wiped the blood off of Christine's legs before assaulting her.
Oh my gosh, that detail sends shivers down my spine because it just suggests a level of premeditation and control that goes beyond a simple act of rage. It almost speaks to a darker psychological motivation, perhaps a desire to depersonalize the victim or to create a twisted fantasy in the killer's mind. What do you think about that?
Honestly, it's heartbreaking and confusing.
Yeah.
And it raises so many questions about the kind of person who could commit such a horrific act.
It's something that forensic psychologists and criminal profilers would look at intensely,
Yeah.
try to get some insights into the killer's psyche.
So let's talk about the missing items, because this is where the motive gets really interesting.
Okay.
The Walker's marriage certificate was gone.
Okay.
Along with Cliff's pocket knife, some cash.
Right.
And strangely enough, Christine's old majorette uniform.
So the theft of the cash and the pocket knife could point to a robbery.
Right.
But the marriage certificate and the uniform?
Yeah.
That's much more personal.
Totally.
Yeah.
You sent in this forum discussion with a lot of focus on Curtis McCall.
Yeah.
What struck you about his story?
Well, McCall was rumored to have been romantically involved with Christine.
Aye.
And so that combined with his ownership of a .22 caliber gun, put him on the radar.
But he denied any involvement, right?
Yes, he maintained his innocence throughout the investigation.
Okay.
Even took multiple polygraph tests. But the problem is, polygraph results from that era aren't always reliable.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have this suspect with a potential motive.
Right.
But the evidence is inconclusive.
Yeah.
What about the other people kind of on the forums list?
Well, there's Wilbur Tooker, a neighbor who, according to some accounts, had made unwanted advances towards Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Some in the community even called him the dirty old man.
Right, but if I remember correctly, he had an alibi.
Yes, he did. And at least for the time being, that seemed to rule him out.
Okay, and then there's Elbert Walker,
Yeah.
Cliff's cousin.
Right.
The forum posts describe him as weird and prone to violence, especially when he was drinking.
Oh.
What's the story there?
Well, Elbert's behavior at the funeral was very strange. People noticed that he was acting strangely, and there were whispers about his temper.
So he was considered a suspect.
He was definitely on the list, but like McCall, he also passed a polygraph test back in 1959.
Right.
Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we know those early polygraph tests weren't always accurate.
And to add another layer of complexity to all of this,
Right.
there was later DNA testing, and it excluded both McCall and Elbert Walker as suspects.
Which brings us to perhaps the most intriguing and certainly the most notorious suspects in this case.
Uh-huh.
Richard Hickok and Perry Smith.
Wait.
The infamous in cold blood killers.
The Clutter family killers.
Yep.
What's the connection?
It's a chilling coincidence. Hickok and Smith were known to be in Florida around the time of the Walker murders.
Yeah, it's a twist that almost feels too cinematic to be true, but the timeline does line up. Hickok and Smith were confirmed to be in Florida in December 1959.
Right.
So that puts them in the right place at the right time, and naturally investigators started to wonder,
if the Walker family murders could be linked to these already notorious killers.
But if they were already wanted for the Clutter family murders in Kansas, wouldn't they have been laying low?
Right.
Would they really risk drawing more attention to themselves with another brutal crime?
That's a great question. Experienced criminals, especially those on the run, tend to avoid unnecessary risks.
Right.
However, we have to consider the possibility that Hickok and Smith were driven by something more impulsive.
Okay.
Something darker than simple logic.
So they could have been on some kind of spree, driven by a need to exert power or inflict pain.
It's a chilling thought, but it's a possibility that can't be ignored. Especially when you consider the nature of the Walker family murders, the brutality, the seemingly random selection of victims,
right,
and the theft of personal items. Those elements align with the patterns we see in other spree killings.
A forum contributor named Tom Valois did some incredible research on this angle.
Right.
They dug up some pretty compelling circumstantial evidence that seems to connect Hickok and Smith to the Walker murders.
Tom Valois' work is a testament to the power of citizen detectives,
Yeah.
They uncovered several details that law enforcement may have initially overlooked.
So let's break down some of those key pieces of evidence. First, there's the brakeman who reported seeing a car matching the description of Hickok and Smith's vehicle near the Walker home on the day of the murders.
Right, so that places them in the vicinity of the crime scene, which is obviously significant,
right,
but it's circumstantial.
Yeah.
It doesn't definitively prove they were at the house.
But then we have the gas station attendants, multiple witnesses who identified Hickok and Smith in the Osprey area shortly after the murders.
Yeah, those identifications carry more weight.
Okay.
Because they put faces to the car, right?
Right.
And one attendant even described Hickok as having scratches on his face.
Oh, wow.
Which could indicate a struggle.
Okay, that's getting harder to dismiss as mere coincidence.
Yeah.
What about the dolls? I remember reading about those in the forum discussions.
Right. A minister in Louisiana reported buying 2 dolls from Hickok and Smith.
Okay.
And the dolls were still wrapped in Christmas paper.
Oh, wow.
And some believe they could have been stolen from the Walker home.
If those were the Walker children's Christmas presents, that would be a direct link between Hickok and Smith and the crime scene.
Exactly. It would move them beyond just being in the area to actually having possessions from the victim's home.
And then there's the pocket knife.
Yeah.
Don McLeod, the friend who discovered the bodies, identified a pocket knife with a distinctive fruit tree design as belonging to Cliff Walker.
Okay.
And that very same knife was found on Richard Hickok when he was arrested for the Clutter family murders in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow, that's huge. If McLeod's identification is accurate,
Yeah.
it means Hickok had something taken directly from the Walker home in his possession.
Right.
It's hard to explain that away as just mere coincidence.
So it seems like there's a lot of evidence pointing towards Hickok and Smith.
Yeah.
But they both denied involvement and passed polygraph tests, right?
Yeah. Yes, they did. And that's where the complexities of forensic science really come into play. Polygraph tests in the 1950s weren't as sophisticated as the technology we have today. Oh. And even with the advancements in DNA technology, we have to consider the degradation of evidence over time.
So even with modern DNA analysis, there's no guarantee of a definitive answer.
That's right. Samples can become contaminated, and sometimes there simply isn't enough material to work with.
Right.
In the case of the Walker murders, DNA testing was done on some of the evidence,
but
the results were inconclusive.
So we're left with this frustrating situation where the circumstantial evidence is pretty damning, but the forensic evidence isn't clear-cut. So what do we do with that? As investigators, do we focus on Hickok and Smith, or do we keep looking for other possibilities?
Ideally, you do both. You pursue every lead,
right?
You re-examine all the evidence, and you keep an open mind. It's possible that Hickok and Smith are responsible for the Walker murders, but it's also possible that someone else is.
That brings us back to the importance of a balanced investigation. Yes, the Hickok and Smith connection is incredibly compelling, but we can't let it overshadow other potential leads. We have to remember that the theft of personal items, like the marriage certificate and the majorette uniform, suggests a more personal motive. Perhaps even an obsession with Christine. What kind of killer takes those specific things?
It's a question that has haunted investigators for decades. It suggests a level of intimacy with the victim. A desire to possess something that belonged to her.
So we have these two main paths of inquiry.
Right.
On one hand, we have two known killers who were in the area and against whom we have some pretty compelling circumstantial evidence. But on the other hand, we have these stolen items that point towards a more personal motive, almost like we're dealing with two different types of killers.
It's a fascinating dichotomy. And it speaks to the complex nature of criminal investigations. Sometimes the answers are straightforward, and sometimes they're tangled up in layers of conflicting information and ambiguous evidence.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the whole investigative process, right? You have to weigh the evidence, consider the psychology of the potential perpetrators, trying to reconstruct a narrative that makes sense.
It's like assembling a puzzle with pieces that don't always fit neatly together.
Right.
And in a case like this, with so much time having passed, those pieces can become even more fragmented, difficult to interpret.
One thing that really struck me in the forum discussions was like the frustration expressed by some contributors about the lack of closure in this case. Some even questioned whether the authorities are truly committed to finding the truth.
It's understandable that people feel that way, especially when a case remains unsolved for decades. The passage of time can make it feel like justice has been denied, like the victims have been forgotten. But it's important to remember that law enforcement agencies often face resource constraints.
Right.
And competing priorities. And sometimes, despite their best efforts, cases simply go cold.
But doesn't the fact that this case continues to generate so much interest, as evidenced by like the active forum discussions, suggest that it's worth revisiting?
Absolutely. Public interest can be a powerful motivator for law enforcement agencies to re-examine cold cases. New technologies emerge, new witnesses come forward, and sometimes just a fresh perspective can make all the difference.
There was this like really tantalizing detail mentioned in the newspaper articles about a phone call received by the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office back in 1994. A bartender in Pennsylvania claimed that a customer had confessed to killing people in Osprey, Florida, and even mentioned the name Walker.
So that phone call, while unverified, adds another layer of intrigue to this whole thing.
Right.
It suggests that someone out there may possess crucial information that could crack this case wide open.
Totally. And remember, Curtis McCall would have been in his 50s.
Right.
At the time of that call.
Yeah.
Placing him in the right age range to be the mysterious confessor.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's like a puzzle, with most of the pieces in place, but a few crucial ones still missing.
Yeah.
And it's those missing pieces that drive investigators and armchair detectives alike
Sure.
to keep searching for answers.
The human desire for closure is incredibly powerful.
Right.
We want to make sense of tragedy.
Yeah.
We want to understand why it happened, and to hold those responsible accountable.
Right.
And in cases like the Walker family murders, where the victims were so innocent, and the violence so senseless, that need for closure is magnified.
Totally. So after all this digging, after exploring all the evidence and theories, where do we stand? Did Hickok and Smith kill the Walker family? Was it someone closer to home? Or will this forever remain one of those mysteries that haunts the true crime world?
The $1,000,000 question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
Right.
We have compelling circumstantial evidence linking Hickok and Smith to the crime.
Right.
But the DNA evidence is inconclusive.
Yeah.
We also have those stolen personal items that suggest a more intimate relationship between the killer and Christine.
It's enough to make your head spin. If you were leading this investigation today, where would you start?
Well, first, I would revisit that DNA evidence.
Okay.
Look for any advancements in technology that might allow for more precise analysis. We know that science is constantly evolving.
Right.
And what was inconclusive a few years ago might yield new insights today.
Okay.
I would also want to re-examine the timeline surrounding Hickok and Smith's movements in Florida.
Right.
Were there any other unsolved crimes in the area that could potentially be linked to them?
And what about those stolen personal items?
I'd want to take a fresh look at everyone in Christine's circle, particularly those who showed any signs of obsession or possessiveness.
Okay.
And I would certainly want to track down that bartender in Pennsylvania who received the alleged confession back in 1994.
Right.
It's a long shot, but any lead is worth pursuing in a case like this.
It seems like there's still so much we don't know.
Yeah.
But by revisiting this case, by examining the evidence with fresh eyes, and by encouraging open discussion and debate, perhaps we can inch closer to the truth.
I agree. The Walker family deserves justice, and even though decades have passed, it's never too late to seek answers.
Well, I think we've given you, our listener, a lot to ponder.
We have.
The Walker family murders remain one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries in American history.
Absolutely.
But perhaps, with enough collective curiosity and determination, we can finally bring their killer to account.
I hope so.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a truly haunting case.
Thanks for having me.
Keep exploring the world with a curious mind, and until next time, stay curious. Welcome back, everybody.